Hello there, and welcome to the Homespun Project. Today we are going to be talking about 20 houses that were built in the Homespun Age. Now, the Homespun Age is a time when it was more classical to do things at home, hence the name Homespun. Located in the town of Lancaster, the Hull House was built by Warren Hull. It's the oldest surviving stone dwelling in Erie County. It was built circa 1810 and is a rare surviving example of federal-style architecture in the Niagara region. Now, it may be looking a bit old, but luckily they're working on restoring it back to its original glory. Speaking of old stone buildings, the Spurs Hotel, constructed circa 1810 by William Spur, opened for business as a hotel amidst the War of 1812. The names of operations have changed over the years, including a function as a stop on the stagecoach mail route until circa 1870. However, its historical significance has always stood firm. The Asa Ransom House, originally constructed in 1853, is located within the historic Clarence hamlet. It features distinct architectural components and is culturally significant for its association with Asa Ransom and Reuben Ebersole. The church at the southwest corner of Broadway and Lake Avenue in the village of Lancaster is the second oldest continuously used religious structure in Erie County. This building was constructed by the Presbyterian Society of Cayuga Creek in 1832. It serves as Lancaster's first library from 1882 until 1896. When the library was moved to the town hall, the church still operated the library until about 1913. When it was taken over by the town. Built by Josh Carpenter by 1831, the Carpenter-Draper House is one of the oldest buildings in Lancaster. In the 1830s, the Draper family purchased the house and used it as their home until 1919. The house is interesting architecturally, as it is only 1 story tall and has a post beam constructed but with wide hand-split planks. Located at 6000 Goodrich Road in Clarence Center, the John Eschman Building was constructed shortly after the Civil War. It is 3 stories high and has always been a general store of some capacity. Clarence town meetings took place on the late 1800s and the early 1900s on the first floor of this building. The second floor of the John Eschman Building is a 3,000 square foot apartment that was once used for a bed and breakfast for the family of the house. Also, housing guests such as mayors, senators, being inaugurated in the town area were able to use this too. The third floor was used as a stage and theater for entertainment. It was also used for political inaugurations. The Eagle House, built by Ozzie Smith, was built using stone from his quarry as a foundation for wood from his mill. He probably worked on the project during its construction, which began in 1827, but the Eagle House did not open until 1832 due to a fire. It became a stagecoach stop as well as a center for social and political activity. As you can see, I was able to get some inside shots of the restaurant. This happens to be the second floor of the building. The Amherst Mennonites built a limestone meeting house in 1834, while themselves being organized in 1828 under John Hur. In this building, services were held with men on one side and women and children on the other. When the congregation disbanded, the town of Amherst took over the building and used it as a records repository until, that. In the early 1800s, Levi Goodrich took ownership of land in the area referred to as the Tonawanda Woods. Sometime before 1825, the 2-story Yankee log cabin was built on his land. In 1830, the Goodrich family moved to Michigan, leaving the cabin to eventually pass down to the Landow family. The cabin was originally built on the east side of Goodrich Road, north of Lap Road, but was restored next to the Clarence Historical Museum. The Williamsville watermill was built in 1811 by Jonas Williams. It has a water wheel, a stone dam, and a stone-lined raceway. It was owned by many local businessmen at the time, like Ozzie Smith and Benjamin Hershey and Benjamin Miller. Today, it is one of the oldest operating buildings in Erie County and is operated by a member of the Miller family, Warren Miller. Built in 1810, the Rice Sinclair Brace House is speculated to be the original Asa Ransom Tavern. The original tavern was described as Joseph Ellicott to be 2 stories high with spacious passages through the middle. The description definitely fits the house, but there is no way to know yet. Also, my dad dropped the camera. Luckily, it did not break, or that would be a quick end to this project. The Gutekunst Store sits on a property that can be traced back to Joseph Ellicott in 1811. At one point, it was a hotel, but then it became a store. In 1920, the George Gutekunst bought the building. His new store sold a variety of goods, from groceries to school supplies. The Magoffin House was built by James Magoffin, who was born on March 22, 1808. He moved to Clarence in 1823 to eventually serve as town supervisor in the 1870s. The house was eventually occupied by Dallin Wallace. Located at Main and Salt Road, the First Presbyterian Church of Clarence was built in 1817. The pastor, Rev. Jackson, helped lay the foundation himself. The cost of the building, well, the entire thing, totaled up to $2,000. The steeple was removed in 1957 because the building was no longer being used as a house of worship. Before it became a meat market, the building was a shoe store, but in 1888, William Loafer purchased the store and converted it into a meat market. In 1923, Richard-Larkin took over the shop and continued to operate it. Richard-Larkin happened to have been born in Clarence. The first school in Clarence Center was built at the corner of, take a guess, Clarence Center and Her Roads in 1825. In 1879, the residents of Clarence Center allowed a 3-story school to be built north of Clarence Center Road. The school had a first floor, held 1st through 4th graders, while the grades 5 through 8 met on the 2nd floor. In 1838, the Reformed Church congregation and the Lutheran Church congregation built a house of worship on Goodrich Road. In 1854, the Lutherans built their own church on Main Street. Now, the worship area would not have to be shared by both congregations. Paul Homan opened the Forest View Dairy Farm on what is now Griner Road. The farm spanned a total of 141 acres, but much of this land was used for raising cattle. Paul also maintained a sizable amount of beech and maple trees, but obviously the farm's main specialty was dairy. This one-room schoolhouse was located at the northwest corner of Keller and Strickler Roads. In 1812, the Common School Act gave towns in New York the ability to establish schools. At this time, tuition and aid from the state covered the cost of the school. Luckily, as of 1867, a law was passed guaranteeing free education for all children. The modern-day Hollow Restaurant was once the first school in Clarence. It is located not far from the Ace Ransom Tavern, and it was opened in 1841. When the school relocated, the property was converted into a store in the early 1900s. It was remodeled. It then became Wagner's Bakery. So let's get started here. So when the original settlers built the houses, what did they usually use?
At that time, they typically used what materials were surrounding from where they were settling. So they used a lot of wood, so they had a lot of split wood from taking down the main trees. They had a lot of brick, a lot of stone, sod, and dirt components were also used to try to make it a stable structure for them to live under.
So obviously they did not have any modern construction vehicles, so how did they build 2-story houses?
At that time, they used the utensils that were most common in that area. So they would build platforms to let them lift the materials up. They use a horse system with a pulley to allow them to have the weight of the equipment being dragged out by the animal, and then have it raised into place, and the men on the platforms then be able to secure it to help build that extra floor.
When you arrived, did they set up some sort of well to get water, or some sort of sleeping area when the builders traveled, or did they go back every day?
In early settlers, water was the primary source for establishment. So a lot of times the settlers would be looking to locate their homes right on the water, so they didn't have to travel far. If they did need goods, they were settling away from a water source or food source. Yes, and during the day, besides having to construct their homestead, they would have to go out and find the food and nutrients they would need to live.
So, is there anything else you would like to add about American architecture of the 1800s?
The architecture of the 1800s was very similar to the growth and settling of ours as a colony, as a United States, as there was multitudes of a variety of architecture. You had Italianate, you had Greek Revival, you had Gothic Revival, you had homestead, you had log cabins. So depending on where the life was being established and how the growth of that time of the town was, you had some very ornate buildings, and then people working out and moving out to the west on the Homestead Act were actually then being grown either log cabins or lean-tos or sod houses.
That was excellent. Thank you for your time. I'd just like to say that you are quite an amazing speaker. So.
Oh, thank you.